Okay, are there any questions? Yeah.
Thanks. I have a naive question for Julia. Looks pretty neat, this pipeline that you developed. I'm wondering a bit about caching. So, I don't know, suppose I look at the data set today, and then I look at the same data set tomorrow, and I look in the same region of that scan. Like, I have no idea about brain imaging, but might be a thing. Like, can you do that? Do you do that on the HTTP level only? Can you do some smarter things using the structure? I don't know. And when you do computations, it sounded like this cell detection somehow. This sounded more expensive than other things maybe. Can you also cache this, or is this completely off topic? I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think parts, so of course we have this running on a virtual machine, which does some caching internally. I think for some modules, there is also caching implemented in the code actually, so it is as fast as possible. So yeah, of course, if you zoom into a region that was never loaded before, this will take some time. Also, for example, with the cell segmentation, this needs to be computed. But because it's just a small patch that is computed, it is very fast. I actually could show it live if I'm... Yeah, so it is, because we don't do it on the whole image, it is rather fast, even if it is not cached. So, yeah, but we take care of caching as well.
Directly to that, so as you have all the data on the HPC system, I guess, on some, how do you do the providing to the web? Because that's always the problem. You have dedicated nodes, I guess, for that, or do you do it your own service way of access to the storage?
Yeah, we have VMs on the JC cloud, which has direct access to the HPC storage. So it's like a mount, so the software can directly read through the mount.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Maybe one more question along those lines. What could it not do?
That depends on you. So it is very extensible. I mean, it also depends on the file format you have on the storage system and what you want to do. So sometimes it might make sense to actually convert data. So for example, if you have a data set that is accessed so frequently, it can make sense to convert it into a different format or to calculate a segmentation beforehand, because the cost of computing it, of course, you need some compute resources to, so for example, we have a VM with GPU access to compute the AI results. So there is always a bit of a trade-off. You have to think how much you want to really have this recomputed and if you can afford recomputing this all the time on request. But yeah, that's a good question. Come up with an idea and I can tell you what it can't do. Yeah, so I think it's quite extensible. So there is a lot you can do with it.
Then I come up with an example. So we are not in like neuroimaging or anything. We are in the atmospheric science, but we have like NetCDF data, for example, which is also 3D gridded effectively, so not too far off, I think, in format. Is it flexible enough to serve our purposes too? Is it adaptable to that?
So yes. So I know that there is another group, working group in Jülich that I don't know which kind of data they have, but they will also be using Tiamat. You would just need to implement a reader for NetCDF. I think it's also HDF5.
It's a subset of HDF5.
So I think that
work
should
too.
be rather easy because the normal HDF5 that we are using is already implemented, so this would be a template. And then, of course, it depends on the application you want to serve. So if you want to have a 3D visualization in NeuralGlancer, that would be directly possible. You would just need to add the reader, and then you could display it already in NeuralGlancer.
It's like
Yeah.
the output format flexible too, like is that also modularized?
Yeah, so you can add a new interface, which could then talk to the application. So a new.
What's required on the application side?
You mean on the interface, or so?
The application, you have to do something on the application side. Did you have to change
Yeah.
NeuralGlancer?
Yeah, so in NeuralGlancer, for example, you would need to put a URL that points to Tiamat, so to the software, and not to. So usually in NeuralGlancer, you give it a URL where it finds a NeuralGlancer pre-computed file, but instead now you give a URL to Tiamat, which then serves what looks as a NeuralGlancer pre-computed file to NeuralGlancer. Yeah.
Thanks, I will look into it.
Yeah.
I think I saw one. Yeah.
I have a question for JB. So the NeuroBagel, like yesterday, the talk by Mario about data mesh reminded me a bit of NeuroBagel, but in the engineering sciences. So how adaptable is NeuroBagel for other fields of like other scientific fields? Like, what would I need to change if I wanted to adapt NeuroBagel for, I don't know, engineering or weather sciences or whatever? Like, do I just need to change like the data model? Like as long as I can model my data, I can like feed it into NeuroBagel and then have engineering bagel.
Yeah, you would definitely. I think if you had samples in another field, for instance, I think changing, so the data model is kind of based on the IDM data model and kind of so it is a subject or sample centric with some longitudinal aspect. So that is the key thing that might have to be changed. If this is a very different field that you don't really care about the sample anymore, you care about something else, like but Seb is already thinking of expanding that to simple data set aspect rather than sample aspect. So so it's not. I think it's kind of easy to expand. Then you would have to kind of expand the. So everything goes through an API for the query. So you don't actually address directly the graph DB. You only go through an API. So that API you probably would have to to change as well a little bit. I don't think it's. It depends on the field and the changes. But I think it in the principle, you have that data model that I think is fairly flexible in terms of expansion. Then the query API, which I think is fairly easy to also expand. And the reason why there's a query API is that you don't want to get any SPARQL query to get into the metadata just in case, And then the visualization aspect is kind of like that's how do you create the GUI that you want to query set of nodes, and that also is customizable, but. I think there's some work to make it easier to customize, but at the moment that would require resource a little bit of a. So I guess a bunch of things, but not huge on each of all those things. I think that's an answer. I'm saying that, but Seb is the right person to answer.
I want to add to that, so thanks for asking. Our teams work together a bit, so. I spoke about the metadata that can come out of a system where you design a schema, and it would also be ideal to be able to kind of auto-generate a querying interface that would then be able to customizably render the stuff that you can query based on the schema. And I think going into when I tested NeuroBagel, it was a while back, so it probably might have changed already. Then our approach would have been and would still be, if it's the same, just mapping our metadata records to whatever the schema is that is implemented by that by NeuroBagel user interface. So in that sense, my understanding was it's not yet that customizable that you can feed it with a schema and it will update accordingly. But that's also some discussions we've been having.
Yeah,
Is that still the same?
Yeah, but there's been a bit of work in that direction. I think that remains true. I think what's customizable easily is the data model itself. So the graph you can change very easily, and the API you can change very easily. The graphical aspect of like how do we eat up something? Yes. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like if we had like a low-key sort of a graphical things that would eat automatically, I think that's super interesting. I mean, there's specific effort to make it very kind of a user-centric. So those automatic things, sometimes they are a little bit clunky, or they are not, or they're a bit crowded, or there's a very specific and thought effort to make it really something that people want to adopt when you are a research clinician, when you are like someone who doesn't want to spend time to try to understand how things. So I think but that's by design. That's really and that is I think was one of the kind of aspect of adoption was helped with that aspect. For sure.
Thanks.
Thanks. Basile, a question for you. So thanks for the talk, pretty impressive, and because I've felt, or I'm feeling the pain of making it streamlined from the raw data to actual analysis and make it actually not only transparent but as well reusable. So the specific question is, for me, was not clear how modular the setup is between, let's say, from the raw data to the analysis-ready data, more or less. So basically, the different states of preprocessing. It seems to me that there you can fork basically this and then do some parts of the preprocessing. But is it all in one data set? So you do you manage it all in data sets that I think I got? But the question is, that nested data sets, or is it all in one data set? Or can you elaborate a little, basically, how you are there sub nestings? Because I think that's very useful, because otherwise it explodes in size. I mean, the CMOD has a lot of sessions, so that's huge. But other data sets are huge, and then if you don't nest, you are doomed, basically.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to answer that question if I get it correctly. So we try to be modular and have each derivative, or each processing to output a new data set, so a new data set, a new Git repo on the platform, and some buckets which are linked to that repo for Git and Exo data hosting. So there is so this is a modularity, and then everything is linked through some module through the Yoda approach, and so there is some module links for provenance. So you have clear source data, which are used to produce the data that you have in hand. And then you can provide also alternative views of the submodules. So you can create a new data set that link all the derivative and present it in a more user-friendly way. So for example, the new bit study standard gonna say, oh, I'm gonna have a super data set where you can have a derivative folder, and then you have here all submodules to the different output of preprocessing. That answer your question?
Yes, yes. I have to look at this. That sounds really nice. I mean, that's you do data sets and then forks within that, basically, specifically. That's how I got. You can combine stuff, I guess. I have to look at it. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hey, JB, for you, the PPMI data, we worked on this as well, and the general problem of public data and so basically is there any unified, did you have a unified way of putting that in bids and analyzing this? Yeah, because we are working on this, and I know that everybody, this is one of the general problems, so the question is a general one. There's open data, it's not in a certain format that we all know and should use or using. So, and everybody does it kind of on the way, but real sharing, it's not on the list, basically. But if it would be, and everybody does it for himself, we should have solved this for, how old is the data set? 10, 20, 15, I don't know. But no, there's partial solutions on any platform. So, and we should solve that. But what's your opinion to that?
It was a very hard and manual work by Michel mostly. It's super difficult. In the interface with Lonnie changes. Even pushing back to Lonnie, which they request to do, like they require to do actually, if I read the usage agreement, it was actually hard work. And it was only tabular data. They wouldn't take our kind of a derivative, imaging derivative. So we ran like, free software, fMRI prep, MMR QC, and all those things. And even that was difficult. And then to add to the to the problem that when some collaborators want to have access to those derivatives, they can't. The DUA doesn't enable you to actually share the derivative. And it's a huge amount of, just putting in bids is a huge amount of work. And then, processing all those things is a huge amount of work, especially like, all the slow pipelines, like, QSI pipe and all those things. So I think we found a way through the Enigma PD consortium that when you have a common project with with us, you can actually get access to those things as in a common project. And also MGFF doesn't care where you put your data. So those data can be, if you want to download the PPMI data and push that on the computer disk, that's okay as well. But no, it's not made easy, and I think it's partly that there's limited resource on the kind of central database side, and they have their system, and it's really hard to change, and they have priorities of X and Y, and so resharing those derivatives is it's crazy. I thank Scott for the a derivative that now are reshareable for the of Open Neuro, because I think that's just. I don't want to know the amount of CPU year that I spent on that, but especially if we start to process not only on fMRI prep but also on QSI and all the diffusion data. It's the governance aspect. So we treat PPMI ourselves. We treat that as a node, an independent node that is not is talking to other nodes. But we can't put, for instance, you don't find the PPMI data in Neurobagel, in the public node of Neurobagel. Right. There's a private node that can have that. But,
yeah, but we can't even basically exchange for we have different access basically to the same data, but we cannot talk or exchange.
That's right. So the only way I think is to form
the same consortia, we were doing, to join forces. But what about transformations, from just data types? That we should be able to share, because it's just masks. There are no subject images and no names in there, nothing. It's just transformation of names, like bitsification. That should be shareable.
The program to that should be shareable. I think that's correct.
And my point here being, we should.
How that program is going to handle the changes that are occurring regularly on the site is a good question. But
yeah, okay. But I think we should, we could join forces in that's the transformations that we can share and transform file names and whatnot. Yeah. That we should really do, because everybody does the same thing.
That we should do. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Don't think I've seen any more hands yet.
Coffee. Yeah, Yarek is asleep, I think. Oh.
Okay. Well, we're a bit early, but maybe we can thank the speakers again